You're listening to Under the Shell Podcast, the best in America.
Welcome to Under the Shell, presented by Testudo Times. I'm Brendan YSL.
Sam Jane.
Michael House.
And today we're bringing on an Assistant Coach of the Year award winner, someone who's from my home state, Michigan, and a Maryland women's basketball savant and legend, Assistant Coach Karen Blair. Karen, take it away. Well, thank you for coming on. We're pleased to welcome on Coach Karen Blair, Assistant Coach for the women's basketball team, longtime Assistant Coach, and winner of an Assistant Coach of the Year award, too. So super excited to have you on, Coach. Thanks again for joining us.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, we have Under the Shell here. You guys have Under the Shell, too. So it's a little merger of content. To start with that team particularly this year, talk to me about the squad. What have you noticed? As an assistant, you know, you've been around some great Maryland teams. This team didn't start off like that, playing better ball as of late, but what's been different about this year?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, we did have some returning, but people don't realize we also were, we were bringing in a lot of new faces. Like even Allie and Emma that were here last year, but then never played a minute, and then you add in, you have this freshman class, and then you have Jakia that's a transfer. So even though we had some experience, it still takes some time for the new ones to kind of learn the system and to get comfortable and to build chemistry. I think we now in the era of the transfer portal and everything, I think it's one of the things that the good coaches are figuring out early is how to build that chemistry. And I think as you're looking at us now, in February, we're a very different team than we were in November. And that's where you want to be right now.
When you talk about kind of building chemistry, you mentioned it in the new NIL landscape. How much of that is looking at the players you want to go out and get, and how much of that is kind of stuff you're doing within the team for team building activities and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the fun part of recruiting is you kind of have to figure out the best pieces. I don't think any of us are going to shy away from the fact that we've not had the rebounding that we're kind of used to having these last 2 years. And we really tried to kind of shore that up, going into that off season. And we got a little bit better, but not as good as we want to be. And I think that'll be like another area of focus. But I think that's kind of always a part of recruiting is you're trying to get, the pieces that you're missing and, as a roster. And some years you're able to get that. And if not, you're trying to get the best players. And it's our jobs as coaches is this is what our current roster is. And, how can we get the best out of this group? And to be honest with you guys, I don't know if anybody's done it better than Brenda. I'm like, if you look at the last 5 years of what has happened and how she has changed what we've done offensively, things that we'll do defensively. And I think, it's a credit to her. And that's why she's going to be that future Hall of Famer, because she takes whatever group we have and she is going to run a system that is best for that group instead of being, this is what we run and this is what we're going to do. And I think that's why we've continued to have so much success is because Brenda's willing to change with the times.
In terms of when this year in the portal, and I'm kind of curious to know because Brenda, I think, does a good job of balancing it, but how much of your guys' philosophy changed of when you want to fix something? Now it's easy to have that like quick Band-Aid fix, right? Like a Jakia and Abby last year, like those type of players, 1 year in and out. On the same hand, if you do that too much, then you lose the prospect of continuation of teams and rosters and stuff like that. How have you guys decided, like, what percentage do you want to do high school recruiting? What percentage do you want to address with the portal? Like, it's an issue that I think a lot of coaches struggle to nail down. Like, what are your guys' philosophy?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I think every year in the transfer portal, it's been different. Like how we were recruiting out of the portal 3 years ago versus what it was like last year. I mean, I think last year was the first time that we've kind of started to see that NIL and the money and those things really play a big factor in recruiting. Whereas 2 years ago, it was like players were still worried about playing time and success of a program that was more important. So for the first time, I think we're kind of seeing in recruiting is sometimes the tradition or the success of that program may not matter. And, that NIL potential may matter more to some recruits. But it is, Sam, it's like you're saying there. I think there's a delicate balance. I mean, if you're able to go into the portal and get a very successful player that has experience versus getting a high school, you've got to be able to have that balance of both. Because like you're saying, you want to be able to have younger players that learn your system, that can learn from those older, more experienced players that you still need to rely on and to count on, and to be able to have them. So it's a delicate balance of being able to have both things to balance your roster.
In terms of the approach with recruiting, I know I've talked to other coaches across different sports about this, but do you
Yeah.
approach the way you recruit transfers different than the way you recruit freshmen? And if you do that, what are the differences?
I think the biggest difference is the transfer portal ends up being more like speed dating. You know, it's like they hit the portal and I mean, you're talking about phone calls, conversations, and it is a process like someone like Chloe Bibby committed over a weekend. You know what I mean? It was a one Zoom with her family. She didn't want to go through this process. She had gone through the recruiting process. She knew what she was looking for and it was over, you know? Then there is still some people in the transfer portal that still want to take 5 visits. Now, like you're saying with high school, I mean, some of these we've started relationships in 8th grade, you know, so I'm like, you're talking about that's a process that goes on 5 years, 6 years, you know, with certain people. So I would say that's the best kind of analysis I can give you. It's like long-term relationship building and speed dating is kind of how the portal gets. The difference, I think, for the student athlete's sake, is I think those that have been in college before, they ask different questions because, you know, they've obviously had the experience of being in college and they know what they're looking for and what they want out of it. So I think sometimes we can, you know, you can have different conversations with a 21, 22-year old than maybe you're having with a 16, 17-year-old out of high school.
So this might be a hard question for you to answer, but I'm curious to know, like, as a fan perspective, you don't always see, like, with recruits it's easier because they put out official visits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What is one player that you guys have tried to get in the portal and it ended up like it didn't end up working for whatever reason, and like if they had been added you'd have been like, wow, they would have been great for us, or like any player that like comes to mind for you guys?
I can think of at least a couple we had that last year, especially from like it was, you know, at a guard position. We were really looking for some point guards, you know, like true point guards to be able to get out of the portal. So yeah, I mean, obviously, if you know anything about Brenda, is Brenda knows how to recruit talent, and we had some really good talent that just didn't work out. I mean, it wasn't for a lack of effort, you know, of trying, and for different reasons. We had a few that were, you know, that we were talking to, some that we had visits with, and it just didn't work out. And as you guys know, that's a little bit about recruiting. You can do everything right, and it doesn't work out, and you can do everything wrong, and it works out perfect. And but yeah, like we definitely had our heart broken a couple times last spring.
And let's ask about that team. So I would agree with you. This like way different team now than when we saw in the beginning of the year. You know, when South Carolina, as good as they are, we're kind of playing you off the floor, and UConn, those games like come to mind. But even, you know, later than that in conference, it looks like a completely different team. But the reality is you still are on the bubble at this point, like of the season, or, you know, there's still a long way to go. But I want to know, what is life like for coaches, for players, when like every game has, you know, massive implications. Like even I was talking to Faith today. She's like, well, like Rutgers is still like Rutgers might not have the like a great record, but they're still a team that can compete with anybody. Especially we saw Illinois beat Indiana like the other night, and when you're on the bubble, any loss can feel like kind of the end of the season. Does it change at all for you coaches or players? Like when last year a 2 seed, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the thing we focus on as a staff, what we're always trying to better, is we just trying to get better. You know, like every single practice, can we get better? And especially like going through the second round of conference now, you're seeing opponents for a second time is like, how can we be better, you know, from where we were? And as coaches, as you're scouting that, you're watching a few games ago, you're like, oh, wow, we're so much better than when we played them the first time. And that's what you really want to see. And that's what we're starting to see, you know. And so I think you try to not, you don't want to make it bigger than it is. Like every game's important. Like you're saying, it doesn't matter who you're playing. Every game you're going out. We're at Maryland. We're used to we get everybody's best game. It doesn't matter who we are. So that's just kind of like when you come here, that's just kind of a pressure that you understand and you accept. So is it any different from this year to last? No. I mean, as we're just trying to stay focused and we just continue to get better. And that's all we can focus on right now.
To kind of stay with this season, I know, right, beginning of the season, you look at the calendar and, the game that a lot of fans looked at was the home Iowa game. It's been sold out for a while. Was that something from the coaching and the team perspective you guys cared at all about? Or was that, you're just going to approach it like any other game?
No, I mean, it's fun. Like you can't say that not everybody wants to compete against the best, and so I think our team, us as coaches, you're trying to, stop the best player in the country, like she's a generational player and she's a lot of fun. And so we were happy to have her at Xfinity, like we obviously we have gotten the best of Iowa when they play at the Xfinity Center. So of course that's a big game, that was on our schedule from the beginning, and very proud of the way our team performed and the way our team played. I mean, you guys know in the Big Ten, you're talking about the top offensive teams in the country. I mean, year in and year out, we traditionally have, several teams in the top 10 and probably half of the conferences in the top 15 in scoring. So, I mean, if you compare us to other conferences, so on every given night, you're going to be challenged, on how to slow teams down and how to stop teams.
I gotta ask, Coach, because you said it, like the loaded schedule too. I mean, this year it's been crazy. Out of the teams you've played, which team has been the hardest to scout? Not maybe even the most talented, the best one. Like, which one's been the hardest as a coaching staff? Where you're like, dude, they just present so many challenges.
Yeah, that's a good question, because there is. I think Indiana, when they're really healthy, when they have Sid Parrish coming back, because they have a lot of shooters on the floor. I mean, obviously in that game when we competed, we didn't have Shy. So that's obviously a big piece, of our team that we were missing for that game. So that's probably the game that I'm most looking forward to, because they have that inside presence with Mackenzie Holm that's really tough. And then all around her is these shooters. So I'm like, I think trying to prepare for them, and they're an interesting challenge, and they're a really good defensive team. So I always know that we have to play well when we match up against them.
I want to ask you a little bit about scouting. So I want to get from a coach perspective, because I think as a fan of like just basketball, conference tournaments are just whirlwinds, right? Like it is just constantly, there's always action. What does a day-to-day look like from an assistant coach perspective at these conference tournaments, or even at the NCAA tournament level during the weekends? Like, what are you doing to prepare? Like, what's the scout like? What is practice like? Take me through it.
Yeah, the Big Ten tournament is probably the hardest week of the year for us as assistants, because you have so many games, right? Those 4 or 5 games that are in a row, and you have no idea who you're playing, who you're not. And you guys have known, if you've looked at the history of the Big Ten, it doesn't matter who you think's going to win. It's never true to form. The seeds are never true to form. So there is always going to be some kind of upset. So for a lot of us, is like, you're, at least before we even get out there, you're trying to get 1 or 2 scouts done, and then when you get out there, you're just constantly working. So to be honest with you, if I get 5 or 6 hours of sleep, and a night during the Big Ten tournament, I feel like, you're really winning, because there's a lot of preparation, but there's also this kind of part of the year where we try and make it really concise, because most of these teams, it's either a second time or a third time you're seeing each other. So there is it's more of like, hey, this is, the areas that we need to improve on. And, and this is what we did really well the last time. Now, the NCAA tournament is a little bit different, right? Because you can play a Thursday, Saturday, each assistant coach can take a team, and it's not nearly as hectic as the Big Ten tournament is. Like you said, the Big Ten tournament, I'm like, for all of us, you're just like, wow. All right, here we go. Everybody buckle up. And as soon as that bracket comes out, every assistant, because each of us are assigned different teams. And some years you'll look at it and you'll be like, great, all my scouts are on our side of the bracket. So I'm in for a lot of long nights. So yeah, that bracket really determines a lot for each assistant.
You just kind of described it a little bit, but is that generally how it works, where like each coach will, pick a couple different teams and then like kind of throughout the year too, and then also in the tournament? Is that accurate?
Yeah. So we have, there's 4 of us that do scouts. Usually there's 3 of us that do the bulk of them, and then we're all assigned. And even when we play them the second time, the same assistant coach still has that scout. So, we'll have those throughout this season. So that's kind of like, as we get into, like I said, when it gets into that bracket, whoever you match up with, and then whoever that you could play in that next game. Everybody's starting to prepare. And we're really lucky. We have Joe Glowacki and a couple video interns that do a lot of work for us, and we're very fortunate, that they help us like break down the film and get that film and give us access to that. So that's really helpful. But as you know, as coaches, it's what we spend so much time in. You're watching 5 to 7 games, of your opponent, and then trying to make that information really concise for your student athletes.
For as much as we talk about scouting opponents, I'm sure there's a lot of self-scouting that goes on too, right? Is like coaches watching film and seeing like what to work on, what you like. If you were a coach of another team and you were scouting Maryland, like how you scout yourself, what would you say is the biggest strength of this team? Like the thing that you would be worried about as a other coach, and also an area you think that teams can attack you guys?
Yeah, I think right now everybody's going to try and slow us down. I think everybody knows that our transition offense is when we can get out and run. That's when we're really dangerous. And that's kind of where we've been. I think the thing that we haven't done very well is I try and make us play that half court game, because we have been a little high in turnovers. I think all of us know, and we've had our fair share of turnovers of transition, and you're going to have some of that because we play fast. But that's an area for us that we've got to be able to get better, is like try and make us play that half court game and really try and execute. We've done a really good job. Like, I'm actually really proud of this group. We've done a really good job of like when we face pressure, and we've seen some really good pressure, in our conference, and have been able to handle it. I mean, that's the thing. When you go through the Big Ten, by the time you get to March, you've really seen it all. Man, zone, triangle, box. I mean, every kind of press, man, zones. And so it's like just getting through the gauntlet of the Big Ten really prepares you, for that next step in postseason.
I'm just surprised you didn't say Jakia Brown-Turner, because we know how much of a tear she's been on lately. I mean,
Hasn't it been great?
He has been hooping, JBT. I want to know, because the season didn't start out this way for her. And it kind of flipped, I think, after I want to say it was either the Michigan State game or the Purdue, either way. One of the games she went like 2 of 11. And since then, she scored 15 plus in almost every game. Was this the player that you guys envisioned when you recruited her? Or is this even beyond what you expected? Like, talk about her ascension and what flipped, like what changed for her.
Yeah, I mean, we knew that Jakia was a big time impact player. I mean, that's, why, and we were happy to be able to bring her back home. I think a lot of people forget Jakia did have an injury, that kind of happened in the fall. And people forget that. But, when you're dealing with different injuries, sometimes it just takes you a minute to get your bounce back and to be able to get your game legs back. And to be quite frank with you guys, I think she just didn't have her bounce. And if you look at her now and you look at her, a month ago and 2 months ago, it wasn't the same bounce. So for us, we knew that. And it was just her staying the course. It was just shots she wasn't finishing when she was getting in the paint. Those jumpers were being short, or, things were being inconsistent. So part of that was just her trying to stay the course and be able to knock those shots down. And now you're seeing it. She's finishing at a better clip. Her confidence is better, and she's being able to impact. And again, I think Kia just had to find her place. And that's what we kind of tell her as a coaching staff, is like, hey, you're a 5th year. This is it. We need you, to be a leader and be a captain. And I think she just kind of finally got comfortable and has really stepped up and has started to lead and made her voice heard. And I know as coaches, we love that, because now this is becoming a player-led team for us.
And, we talk about players that have made leaps. Jakia, I think Bree has been, one of the most improved players in the country. I want to know from your, because you get a more behind the scenes look, what's a player that, kind of the same thing I asked you earlier, a player who you've been just super impressed by taking that next step, like, and has just, been really solid for you guys this year. And then who's a player that you think either that'll come sooner rather than later, or you wish had kind of break down the year you guys thought would?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, Bree has been, she made that really big jump, and we need her to be able to make that jump. And the fact that she's even played point guard minutes for us, that's not even Bree's natural position. And she's not only been good at it, but has excelled. I mean, you just look at her speed and, when she gets out in the open court and the things that her passing has gotten so much, more improved as the years gone along. Like I'm loving the chemistry that her and Allie are starting to develop as, they get more minutes together. And I think, for her, I wouldn't say it was a surprise, but it's good to see that she's been able to be consistent. And I think that's the hardest thing to do, is to really be consistent. And especially as a sophomore, I think she's had a really good year. I would say probably the one that I think a lot of people don't know how smart Emily Fisher really is, because Emily Fisher is capable of playing so many different positions and just her feel for the game. Like defensively, she's able to cover up her teammates and she can play inside, play outside. And so I've been really just impressed with her feel and just her intelligence. Like I knew from recruiting her in AAU in high school that Emily was a really good scorer and could do a lot of things, but I didn't quite realize just how athletic Emily really is. Like if you really kind of watch Emily and just how smart she is and how she's able to anticipate on the floor.
And do you guys want to see her be more aggressive offensively? Because she told me, like, it's like, dude, look at the basket. Like sometimes I'm watching the game and I'm like, you got a wide open layup. Just like you were good in high school, you could score. Like take it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Sam, I think she hears that from all of us all the time. Every single time she doesn't take an open shot in practice, everybody knows about it. And, she's starting to get more comfortable with that. Like she's starting to rip and drive more and really trying to find those spots. But yeah, we need her to. We need her to be able to do it because she's really comfortable handling the ball against pressure. She rebounds, she boxes out. She does so many little things really well. And it's just like, we're like, just shoot it. Like that's kind of that last piece for her, is just to continue to be more comfortable and, and keep attacking off the dribble, because she's more than capable.
She almost feels like how Bree was playing at the end of last year. Like if she has this good of a tournament as Bree did, obviously, but you look at their numbers and Bree had a little more shots per game and like her usage rate was a tad higher, but just like stat comparison, they look exactly the same. It's like I don't know. Do you think Emily has the offensive side of Bree? It feels like maybe she's even a better defender, more versatile, but Bree maybe brings a little more off the bounce. Or would you say that's a fair comparison, or what do you guys think?
Yeah. I mean, I think Bree's speed is unbelievable. As you know, I mean, like that burst of speed that she has, it's hard for anybody to keep her in front. And I do think I'm with you. I feel like Emily going into this, as we continue to play into this, this next month or so, she's going to continue to be more comfortable and find her spots. We're starting to see it in practice. And as you guys know, as players start to do it in practice, it's always going to carry over into the games. I thought our last game against Penn State, she was more aggressive and she did a lot of things for us good defensively. So I think it's just part of it. As players get more confident, then they tend to look for their shot more. And I think right now Emily's really trending up in that direction and she knows she has the support. Us as a coaching staff, all of her teammates, we're all telling her to shoot it. That's a really good place to be in, Sam. You like it when your teammates and your coaches are begging you to let it go, right? Versus like, hey, take it out, right?
Yeah, I would be like, all right, coach, let me grab that.
Yeah, so I would expect big things from Emily as we keep going.
And then last question before we have our little segment for you. When you think of this team in March, like how does it stack up with like the favorite groups you've coached? Like first of all, who's the like most fun team you've had coaching at Maryland, and where would this group rank in terms of enjoyment of the teams you coach? Because every team is fun in their own way, I'm sure, but just in terms of pure like I just love coaching this team. What group would be that for you out of your time at Maryland?
I will tell you what, this group has a lot of personality. Like they are a lot of fun. You've been at our practices. Hawa all by herself is a riot. Bree by herself is an absolute riot. And and then Riley, she acts quiet, but Riley is not very quiet. Like once you get around it. So I mean, that's the thing. Their chemistry off the court is fantastic. I love coaching them. You love going to practice every day. And that's where we may not have, this hasn't been the ideal season, but if you've been in this long enough, like you're doing coaching, it's like sometimes things are just hard, right? Like you play this number 3 strength of schedule and it may be tough at the times, but there's a reason you have to kind of go through these growing pains so that it pays off for you later down the road and in the end. And that's kind of like the way that this is trending for us, and you guys have been here and covered Brenda long enough. No one bets against Brenda Freeze in February and March. She always has her teams, playing better, playing their best basketball. She's really intentional with their rest, and focusing on these little things and getting their confidence high. So I'm like, I feel like we're really heading in the right direction and going into March.
I know I told you one more, but I actually lied. It's a classic journalism thing. I need to hear, what's your best Brenda Freeze story off the court that you have? Because you guys, I'm sure, spend a lot of time together.
Oh gosh, do we? I mean, most of our things, it's not a big shocker, right? That we're all super competitive. So we have become the pickleball staff of all pickleball staffs, in case you guys don't know. And it has been so much fun because so many of our scout guys are also pickleballers. So I think this past fall, we could share a lot of good competitive stories. And trust me, Brenda is no less competitive when we get out there. She's not afraid to slam it down, and we all have our fair share of talking to each other and trying to get into each other's heads. So I'm like, that's just the fun part. I mean, the thing about Brenda is she works really hard. There's no surprise that she's been as successful as she has, but she also celebrates. She celebrates the wins, and we know how to have fun. And even, like I say, in those competitive environments, it'll be a long day, and she'll be like, "Hey, you know what, guys? Let's just leave a little early and go play pickleball and have a good time." And it's fun. Like that's a different way of building chemistry, even as a staff. As you know, it's kind of like that top down. It starts at the top.
So who's the best player? Like who are we taking here?
I'm going to go definitely Joe Glowacki, our video coordinator, and Joe has got 7,000 different paddles to prove it and probably could tell you. As a true good video guy, he's studied a lot of film, and I would put probably Coach B right under there. Like she's got a good game. She's got good length when you put her up at the front of the net. She's hard to get the ball by.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, this was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it on a somber note because every week we do a draft of something Maryland athletics related. This week, because of how bad, no offense to the men's basketball team, how unfortunately their season is gone, we did the worst, top 3, disheartening, sad, worst, whatever you want to call it, Maryland basketball losses. So in your time here, what would be 3 losses that stood out to you where you were just like, shit, man, like what is going on?
Yeah. I think the most painful one for me was probably the loss to Texas in the NCAA tournament. That was that one still hurts. Like that one took like probably a month to be able to go back and to watch that game kind of the way that it ended. I do think there was another year where we got upset at Northwestern. I think that was like maybe Kyla's senior year. It ended up being a very pivotal moment because that's like one of those where you take one of those L's and everybody kind of gets it together. And then that team rattled off like how many victories like that COVID year. I'm like, we weren't even coaching that team at that point. We were just clapping, right? Like they were Final Four bound to be great. And, had it not been for COVID. So that one for me, it was just kind of very uncharacteristic. Gosh, a third one, Sam. It's usually for me.
I said the UCLA loss at home I think it was round of 32.
Oh, that would have been my first year here. Yeah, that one was also that one did hurt. But it's kind of like we talked about. That UCLA one is what used that fuel for that next group that next year.
Right.
And that's why that group was so good. It was like it took them a minute to figure it out, but like once they got to January, it was done. It was automatic. I mean, you remember that Steph Jones was averaging like 25 points every game. Like it was.
I went back and looked through because like I was looking at and they were rolling like ripping off wins. Crazy.
Same. I was a glorified cheerleader, and it was the best job I ever had. They had it. We just clapped and cheered. You guys let us know when you need us. We're over here. You talk about a fun game. You look at that Big Ten game, and we ended up losing. But Megan Gustafson and Kyla Charles in that game, it was like bucket to bucket. I feel like they both almost had 30 points going into half, and it was so much fun to be a part of, just watching these 2 powerhouse players like go back and forth, and it was fun. It was really, that was a special one.
That's a name, man, I have not thought of in a while, but Megan, that people talk about Caitlin Clark, but she was a bucket too, man, from Iowa.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, Coach, this was a lot of fun. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking with us, and good luck the episode will be released tomorrow, so good luck today
Thank
against
you.
Rutgers, and good luck the rest of the season.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you so much. Appreciate all you guys do.
And that was assistant coach Karen Blair. Great insight from her about the team and how they've gotten to this point so far this season. And I guess let's kind of talk about the team. Let's talk about that big win they just had Sunday against Penn State. Arguably the biggest game of their season so far, Sam. I know you were there. It was senior day. What were you seeing?
Yeah, big win for the Terps. Probably puts them on the right side of the NCAA tournament bubble. My friend of the pod, hopefully Mark Schindler, who does bracketology for the Athletics, said that they're pretty comfortably in after the win on Sunday. So, in that one, their defense, man, that's back-to-back games. We talked about it last week with Illinois, and now this week held Penn State, who's the third best offense in the Big Ten, to their season low in points, forced them to turn it over the most amount of times this season. And then Jakia Brown-Turner, Mike, I got to give you props, man. She's turning it around. Has played really, really well this past month, basically. And honestly, like Cheyenne Sellers is still this team's best player, but Brown-Turner has become probably their primary scoring option. Just doing it in a variety of ways, really getting downhill, running in transition well. And I don't want to you don't want to ride the wave because Penn State has been on a slump. I still think this team is a low caliber NCAA tournament team, but I wouldn't hesitate to argue they might be the fourth best team in the Big Ten, which is kind of a big gap after Ohio State, Indiana, and Iowa. That's kind of the tier jump, but Maryland is right there, and with a couple slip ups by some other teams, they could get a double bye, which seems unlikely, but they're right there. So big win on Sunday.
I'm still kind of on the fence about the team. I really feel like the win was only their third quality win in a season where they haven't really beaten a premier opponent, somebody who was ranked at the time that they played them. I'll give them Green Bay, if you want to call that a quality win, since they beat Wazoo in that tournament. But, I mean, I'm still not really impressed. They have 2 more games out of the 4 left that are against ranked opponents. They play against Ohio State and they play against Indiana, I believe. I can see them dropping those 2 games pretty easily, ending the season 2-2 and with a record of 17-12. And I think their NCAA tournament chances are going to largely hinge upon that Big Ten tournament. And I think if they get that double bye, that'll really help them, like Sam was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that the lack of the high caliber win is definitely apparent on this team's resume. But, I mean, at this point, they're 25 in the net rankings, which is what the NCAA uses. So they're a top 25 team in the country, according to the metrics. And if you dive a little deeper, they do have some more quality wins. George Mason is on the tournament bubble. They beat them. Minnesota's been sliding, but they beat them, and they are in the tournament picture.
But these aren't teams that aren't
Yeah, but I mean, we're not saying they're going to beat a top 10 team in the country. No one is arguing, and that's the problem. They haven't played that 11 through 27, 28 caliber team other than Washington State. They lost. They've played UConn, South Carolina, Iowa, Indiana, and Ohio State, all of which rank in the top 10. So if you want to say they haven't beat a top 10 caliber opponent, yes, that has been a questionable, a glaring hole on their resume, right? But it's not like they have the opportunity. The Big Ten is such a weird year this year that they lost to Michigan State and Michigan and Nebraska in some close games. You flip a couple of those around, it looks a lot better. But those games have all been on the road and losses by a round of possession. And I think if Jakia Brown-Turner was playing the way she is now in those games, Maryland's 3-0 in those, no questions asked.
I know you gave your predictions about the season way back last year in 2023, but it's kind of shaping up to be what you thought it was going to be, right? A team that wasn't going to be incredible and maybe wasn't going to win these highly ranked games, but was going to make the tournament and finish in the top 4 or 5 of the Big Ten. And that's pretty much what we've seen in the last week. I know I kind of made the joking comment after the Iowa game that was like, well, if this team can play like they did against Iowa, I don't think they've played that well since then, but I think that game definitely jump-started the success of the past 3 games, and then
Right.
I assume they'll carry it into the Rutgers game, which should be an easy win at home.
Yeah, shout out my prediction of Ohio State winning the Big Ten. That looks pretty good right now. I was on the Buckeyes.
I'll give you that.
Yeah, I think that Mike is right though that I see 2-2 because I don't think they're beating Indiana. Maybe, probably not. I don't think they're beating Ohio State or Indiana on the road. So you probably finish 2-2. Michigan State and Nebraska both kind of have joke schedules down the stretch. So they'll probably get the 4 and 5. So I would think Maryland's going to be that 6th seed right in there at the 6th seed. And Mike is right. I don't know about tournament hopes hinging on Minneapolis, but it definitely will be a battleground of bubble teams down there. So I'm really excited for that. But yeah, a good week for Maryland women's, and they go 1-1 this week. I think that's all you can expect. Really, cannot lose to Rutgers at home. That would end the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Another 1-1 week from the men's basketball team, but it's not exactly what they were looking for. The loss to Illinois in a pretty hostile game, pretty much summed up their whole season. Cannot win a close game.
Kevin Willard stealing basketballs. People are talking.
I didn't think, from watching that game, I didn't think that play was that controversial, but then a lot of people were talking about it, yeah.
They kind of joked about it. Like, the two of them joked about it right after I saw. So I don't think it was a big deal. It was just funny. Yeah, you're right, B. I mean, it's been the story of this team's season. They can't win close games. They can't really win in general. I think the biggest disappointment is just how much you're wasting of Jameer Young, but it seems like he's even kind of tired out here down the, like, not sputtering, but you carry the load for so long, and eventually that weight becomes too much to bear. It's just a shame because he's had such a strong career here, but this season, which was supposed to be like his mea culpa, has been anything but.
There was, I think to close the game, there's 3 consecutive possessions where he missed shots, and it allowed Illinois to kind of grow their lead, kind of cement that win there. He's just kind of getting tired out. The burnout of the season's kind of coming upon him. They don't have anybody stepping up at this time. We talked 2-3 months ago saying at this time the freshman class, Jamie Kaiser, DHS, they were going to be in their true form. They were going to be comfortable. Still hasn't seemed like that happened yet.
No, Mike is right. The one possession that stood out to me was they're down 1 with about 2 minutes to go, I think. Jameer gets a run out, 2-on-1, chance to bring it within a 1-point game, goes up for a layup. It gets blocked or he just misses. Illinois gets the rebound, chucks it down the court. Coleman Hawkins dunk and 1 foul. Back up 7 then, I think.
That was a chance for them to take the lead. They were down 1. So
okay, down 1, yeah, sorry.
So it was a 5-point swing.
5-point swing, yeah. And
that was the game. Once that play happened, you could see it in the players' faces. You could feel it in the crowd. Like, the game was over at that point.
Yeah. No, when I was watching it, I saw it and I was like, yeah, ball game. Like, that was just such a brutal swing. And you can't really blame, like Willard says it too, you can't blame Jameer. He's been so good this year. But it's been kind of weird. He's been better on the road than at home. I don't really understand that.
Yeah, that's a super odd thing. I don't really know what the reason for that would be, but he has had those incredible games. I think part of it is that on the road, the rest of his team has been pretty awful. And so for them to have any chance of competing, Jameer knows he has to step up, and he's done that and did that in a couple games. And I think the other thing is that this game meant a ton to Illinois. You could see it, Hawkins taunting them on social media after and stuff like that, and Underwood never winning or getting his first win ever in Xfinity. So little things like that. Illinois was, for a team that was, easily in the tournament, and this game probably meant something to them because it's a regular Big Ten game, but it definitely meant more to them, and they deserve to win.
That was an elite troll. I'm not going to lie. Elite.
It's pretty funny. I'll give you that.
It's hilarious. Excellent job by Coleman Hawkins. But Illinois also hasn't won since Obama was in office. So let's settle down with the champagne is greater than College Park talk. But we did have a flip side of a Terp team beating a team in orange, literally the Syracuse Orange. That was kind of a fire transition. I'm not going to lie. Thank you, Under the Shell listeners. The Maryland lacrosse team, crazy game. And folks, I'm not going to lie, spring season looks awfully better than the forecast for winter sports. Brendan, what did you see in kind of both the teams matchup? But we'll start with men's.
Are you talking about the men's or the women's team? Because they both beat Syracuse in overtime. So let's start with the men, a 13-12 win. I think that game was a little bit more interesting just because of the way it ended in overtime, tied at 12. Game was tied 7 different times, totally back and forth. But in overtime, Syracuse scored. They thought they had won. Syracuse, the goal, he dove into the goal mouth, so the goal got called back. It was honestly pretty controversial. Was he pushed? If he was pushed, then the goal would have counted. So it was a controversial call, but it went Maryland's way. They got the ball back, and then they scored. And so George Stamos.
The rule was added in 2020, I read today, which is kind of crazy. Like 3 years later.
I mean, it worked out for Maryland in this case, and absolutely a big win.
Stamos hasn't he's a it's not like he's considered to be this great goal scorer. I mean, that's
no, not at all. I mean, him even taking the shot was probably a surprise to a lot of people.
Right, as a freshman too. That's something he won't ever forget. And I mean, that's a huge win over a top 5 team, but it's not like it gets any easier, right? I mean, they play number 1 Notre Dame and number 3 Virginia in 2 of their next 3. So,
and before that, they face off against Princeton this weekend, who's the 11th best team in the country. But the 2 overtime wins early in the season is good. That's great experience, and that's what you want.
Yeah, I mean, but I think we also have to mention how good Ajax Zapatella was. Syracuse, we talked about it last year. The guy they have, Spallina, Joey Spallina, basically the nation's top scorer Syracuse has, and they completely limited him. I mean, credit to the Diamondback for this, obviously, because I read this morning, but he defended Spallina one-on-one and held him to just a goal and 2 assists. That's a really, really good performance by the Terps star defenseman, guy who wears number 1, to be able to shut him down and then obviously play into the game-winning goal. So huge win for Maryland. And the women's team did it just as well. Probably a more convincing win, but still in overtime, 9-8 finish against the Orange. Brendan, Kathy Reese's team, man, I see something with this squad. What are you thinking about here with the women's team?
I mean, this was absolutely just a textbook revenge game. Maryland lost to Syracuse. Game was away, just like it was this past year. 20-11 last year. And then that was, a game early in the season where they let up 20 goals, something nobody was really expecting. And then come back this year and only allow 8 goals and play a very solid defensive game and then win it. Another overtime win for Maryland was very solid. Game was interesting, though. Maryland scored 3 goals in the first quarter and then went on a 22-minute scoreless streak. So it looked for a while there like, Maryland had scored their 3 goals. They did their offensive damage, and then we would see something like we saw the previous year where the defense just kind of let up. But Corey Edmondson, sophomore sensation, had 2 goals 2 minutes apart and just revived the offense. Maryland moves to 24-3 all time against Syracuse. So, like I said, revenge game, and they got the win back on their side. Moving forward for women's lacrosse, going to take on Drexel on Wednesday. Super interesting thing about that, Maryland and Drexel had never played before last year. This is now their 3rd meeting in the past year, so it'll be interesting.
Crazy. Emily Sterling, shout out, All-American goalkeeper, continues to be really, really good. They kind of have that that's a star-based team, right? I mean, Edmondson, the Clevengers, Sterling, they got some high-level talent. So it'll be really fun to watch them throughout the year. It's funny, I've kind of gotten ingrained in lax. I've been watching more and more since I didn't watch a single college lacrosse game before I arrived at Maryland, and now I'm talking about it. So it's been fun to watch 2 of the Terps' top teams. But there's another spring team that we actually have someone who knows really well, who knows it well, should I say. The baseball boys, opening series against Georgia Southern, took 2 out of 3. Pretty good at about what you could ask for of Matt Swope. I mean, obviously some negatives to look at, but I would say mostly positive. Kenny Littman started game one, and then Mike, quickly, what are some of the big takeaways from this weekend? Take us through it.
I think the biggest takeaway is just our pitching depth. I kind of want to hone in on the relief pitchers in Friday and Saturday's win. So in the Friday win, Logan Barrier went 4 innings in relief after Kenny Littman pitched and started. He retired his last 7 batters faced as Maryland came back to win that game, win Matt Swope's first game as head coach of the Terps. And then the next day, freshman Joey McManus, in his first appearance in college, goes 4 scoreless innings, allows only 1 hit. Really promising stuff to see from that pitching staff. A pitching staff that, it's no secret, they had some struggles last year. You also, this weekend, got some good performances from Alex Calarco and Chris Akopian, both hit their first home runs as members of the Terps. And then returner Jacob Orr had a strong first weekend with a team lead 4 RBI. So a lot of good performances to come around. Obviously, they would have wanted to get that sweep, but pretty happy to get a series win to open up the season.
Yeah, Mike, and they return home to College Park. That game will be played by the time this episode is released. I would expect them to beat Mount St. Mary's, but this weekend they got a little bit of a step up in competition. What do the Terps have going on when they go down to the Kleberg Bank College Classic in Texas?
Yeah, they'll be facing 3 teams this weekend: Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, Pitt, and then probably the most interesting, in my opinion, we're going to get a little bit of a Big Ten preview against Washington. So really excited to see what happens there. It's going to be interesting to see how the arms hold up. They had a really good showing in weekend number 1. Can they keep that up weekend number 2? A lot of arms did not see any time out of the bullpen because of how long Logan Barrier and Joey McManus went in there. So a lot of fresh arms. Wait to see what happens Tuesday, but yeah.
I'm excited for you to have to experience Flow Sports for the first time. Boy, is that a good time. But yeah, the baseball guys will be in action this weekend, probably hoping for, what'd you say, Mike, 2-1 would be a good weekend?
2-1 would be pretty good. Back-to-back 2-1 weekends plus a midweek win over Mount St. Mary's. That puts you, what?
That'd be 5-2.
5-2. Look at us. Look at our math here, guys.
I'm laughing, man.
For a better start. 5-2 is really.
Throw that in Excel and we'll have it done. Yeah.
Quit playing with me on the math, man. But yeah, the baseball team, obviously, Matt Swope, good start for them, and it'll be interesting to keep following them. We talk about softball. It's a new coach as well, Lauren Karn. Team is not off to maybe as good of a start, but we kind of thought that would happen. They're 3-7. They lost this past weekend. 2 games they dropped. What was going on with Syracuse, guys? I mean, Maryland just decided, hey, like, we're going to play the orange in every single sport. They lost 2 times to them, alongside losses to southeastern Louisiana and southeast Missouri. Beat Missouri in an earlier. I don't know. I don't really think there's much to talk about. This team just they're adjusting to the culture, I guess. I mean, I to be honest with you, I didn't watch any of the games, and looking at the scores, it doesn't really surprise me that the offense has been struggling. So Karn has her work cut out for her. This season's got to be just kind of about building a baseline.
I feel like you can probably talk to this, Sam, because you covered the team last year. But when you look at going forward, at least, I feel like the problem last year was offense, and the defense last year was really solid. They'd have a bunch of games where they, would lose 2-1 or 3-0, stuff like that. Is that the biggest difference you see between this year's team and last?
Yeah, it's still early. I think that, but I mean, when you look at the stats, it's not like the pitching has been terrible. I mean, Courtney Weiss has a 2.92 ERA. Bree Godfrey has a 2.44. Kira Busher hasn't been as good as you thought, but the people that they've brought in have been solid. It's still just this offensive problem, I think. If one hitter hitting above 300, Jada McFarland, who obviously is this team's best player, hasn't started the season off very good. She's hitting 212 with a 653 OPS, even worse on base percentage at 350, no home runs. So it's been a struggle for her, and people that you thought would be ready to go have not really started the season well. I mean, Michaela Jones, Megan McCamey, Madison Runyon, Sammy Woods, these are all players that came back and they just haven't been impressive so far. So I think the offense will still be an issue. Maybe as the season goes on, you'll see players get adjusted, but overall, this team just doesn't really have the talent or the experience, I don't think, to compete in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it's still super early, so we'll have to see where it goes. From the start of play to the end of Big Ten play, wrestling finished Big Ten play this past weekend. Finished with 2 wins this year. Their most ever. We talked about that in an earlier episode. Positive trend for the team. I still don't think they'll make too much damage in the Big Ten tournament, but before they do, they have one final match against Drexel on Friday. I'm not sure how many of their starters are going to wrestle, kind of just a tune-up. Drexel has nobody ranked, kind of just one last match to get ready to go before Big Ten play, and also possibly an opportunity to get some other guys. And then the best Big Ten tournament of them all, track and field.
Right.
In 2023, Mike may know this from his coverage in the fall, but in 2023 indoor championships, Maryland only has a women's indoor team, but they scored 7 points. The winner had 109, just to put that in perspective, so 102 away. I was looking at some of the results, looking at the, what some of the athletes have done this year, and I would say 7 points might not, they might not get there this year. If you look at the rankings of events, relays are usually a good opportunity to score points, and the 4x4 and 4x2 are both not ranked very highly. I think 12 out of 13 teams, so not looking very good there. And they have 2 athletes, Janessa Wolf, who's 10th in high jump in the Big Ten, and Chioma Njoku, who's 6th in weight throw. Both of them, though, did it on performances that are a bit of outliers. So I think it's possible that they come away with only 2 or 3 points.
There's your only coverage that you will ever find of the track team at Maryland. So shout out Brendan for that. No one else is doing. No one else is grinding like
Mike had some good stories earlier in the year.
I was about to ask, how's Anna Coffin doing? I know she had a pretty good fall with the cross country.
Just from the list that I looked at in the rankings, which were the top 20, 25, which people I thought had a chance of scoring in the meet, her name didn't pop up anywhere. So
yeah, Katie Alteri, was she in there?
No, she was not.
Wow, none of these names I know.
These names got the Mike House profile boost. What are we doing here? But yeah, that was really good, really quick recap of everything. Maryland sports. We're still kind of in that crossover season. Next weekend, or next week's episode, we should have a more succinct look at the women's basketball tournament picture, kind of wrapping up the hoop season, and we'll have more baseball to talk about. So be on the lookout for that, and be on the lookout for a person talking about probably the biggest Maryland news of the weekend. Real quick, we can hit on it. Lefty Drysdale, former legendary Maryland basketball coach, passed away. Obviously, someone who transformed Maryland basketball. Gary Williams said that, if it wasn't for Lefty, that Maryland, he wouldn't have came to Maryland, and he tried to make it the, quote, UCLA of the East. I don't know if it ever got there, but definitely a legendary figure in college hoops. So condolences to the Drysdale family. We'll have someone on next week to talk more about Lefty's legacy, and obviously, just like any other person, in that time, a lot of things to look at. So it'll be really interesting to hear next week about that. So obviously, condolences to the Drysdale family, and guy was a transformed Maryland basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. Maryland basketball would not even be close to what it became or what it was without him. But with that being said, there's a lot more reporting to do on kind of his legacy and impact he had on Maryland from before he got here, and the good and the bad. So overall, very historic figure.
Mm-hmm. And we'll move from obviously talking all about the sports season to something that also is sombering look for our draft this week, because it's been a down season for Maryland hoops. I mean, I know the women's team has kind of transformed itself, but it's been bad for the men's. It hasn't been up to standard for the women's. We are doing our top 3 most heartbreaking / worst Maryland basketball losses. There's a bunch of them, I'm sure, as we all know. One qualification I would say is you get one tournament loss. So obviously tournament losses have a way bigger, emotional attachment to it. But to pick all tournament losses, I don't think we can do. So we are going to limit it to one tournament loss. So we can get started. Brendan, you actually, or Mike, sorry, not Brendan. Mike, you won in the polls of the food draft. So you can get us started with your top pick, and then we can go to the reigning champ, and that's me, before Brendan wraps us up. Take us
What can
away.
I say? Picking crabs, the hometown favorite. I knew that was going to get me. But I'm going to take a regular. Huh?
Some are saying that you're pandering to the audience.
Personal preference. I'm going to go with. I'm going to take an obvious one. I'm going to take Corey Lucius, 2010, second round, beats the Terps at the buzzer. Michigan State entered that game very injury riddled, but somehow pulled out a win at the buzzer. That was one of Gary's final seasons in Maryland, and I'm sure he would have wanted it to end differently.
Yeah, I'm going to take another tournament loss. I'm going to take the Tremont Waters game-winning layup that he definitely traveled on. So,
Yeah, that was a travel. 1,000.
yeah, that was a tough loss, and I think that would have been to go to the Sweet 16, which would have been Turge's second one, after beating Belmont in a really exciting game. So that'll be my pick.
This one's kind of hard to say because the season never actually ended, but I think the college game day game against Michigan State, those games are big because you have a big media market in, you have a lot of students there, and so games like that, when you have a lot of eyes on you, it's big for recruits, it's big for the program, and it's big for donors, it's big for everything. And so losing that game in kind of an embarrassing fashion to Michigan State, be my first pick. College game day is just cool, and Maryland hasn't had it back since then in any sport, so that'll be my first up on the list. And then pick number 2, I'll go to the tournament and I'll stay on the men's side. The Final Four loss to Duke. Tragic because Maryland hadn't made it that far very often, but could kind of be seen as a good thing. Jump-started their success for the next year.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick, Brendan. I think that's just kind of the prelude to, a great next year, obviously. My pick, I'm gonna go to the women's side. I think that I've had been able to cover them a little bit and see some crazy losses, but I'm gonna go with the 2018-2019 when they were 29-5 hosting NCAA tournament games, and they lost to UCLA at Xfinity Center in the second round of the tournament. That was just, obviously that whole year was just a weird year. I mean, Maryland had a really good team, but Michaela Onyenwere from UCLA scored 30, and Maryland just couldn't recover. It was a weird game and disappointing end to the season. So I'm going to go second round exit.
My next pick is going to be a weaker one, but I'm going to follow it with a very good one. So I'm going to take the UCLA blowout loss at home last season. The hype was at an all-time high for the program. First year, Kevin Willard just beat Illinois Gold Rush game. A lot of hype heading into the game, only for them to drop a dud. But for my last pick, I'm going to take the 2020 season as their biggest loss. The lost season, as you might put it. The season where they beat 3 ranked opponents in the Big Ten. The season where they had just beaten number 25 Michigan at home, claimed the share of the Big Ten title, but never finished it due to COVID-19.
He's always just finding a way to, you two are always finding ways to, pander in, next I'm going to be the loss of Hakeem Hart, just transferring, just a brutal loss.
The loss of Hakeem Hart, that's a funny one. That's a good one.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I'm going to since you scam the system, Mike, I'm going to scam the system a little bit. With my next pick, I'm going to take a kind of a non-one loss, but a 5-game losing streak in the middle of Turge's last season, where they lost 3 home games and just really sealed the fate of Mark Turgeon in Maryland. Depressing season. And I think the worst one was when they lost by 1 point to then number 3 Purdue in West Lafayette. That'll be my pick.
Right on there, Sam. Okay. I'm pretty proud of this pick, honestly. And a lot of people are comparing this season to the previous season, and that's because they went 0-5 on the road. My pick is the 1912-1913 season. And give me a minute to explain this. So, first game of the year, Maryland lost 4 to the Central YMCA. All right, not a very good game. Second game of the season, 7 days later, they lost 4 to Mount St. Joseph's. Once again, not a very good game. Give 4 more days. That Wednesday, they lost to Gallaudet. That is a school for the deaf and hard of hearing. They lost to Virginia 2 days later.
My God.
They had a win in there against Baltimore City College in overtime, and then they lost to George Washington, and they lost to Georgetown. Just pretty heartbreaking hometown losses you don't want to see.
That's brutal. Yeah, that's a good pick. I think that you got a bunch.
I mean, also losing to the Central YMCA, I wouldn't chalk up as pretty good game. So
that's not great. I don't think that.
Is this what you had in mind when you did this draft, Sam?
There's other ones we didn't name. Yeah, I mean, think about. There's the other one when Maryland lost as a number 6 seed to UNC Wilmington the year after they won the national championship. So we talked about the year before. How about the year after? Game-winning buzzer beater from UNC Wilmington. Have you guys ever seen that list? That was a crazy, crazy game. But yeah, I think that was a fun one and fun draft. Even though that'll bring back some depressing moments for Maryland fans. But yeah, way to bounce us right back up, get us back in a good mood. Is listening to Brendan's Terrific Terp. B, take it away.
This week's Terrific Terp is a 2-time United States amateur golf champion. Dean Berman was a 2-time All-American in college, but is better known for the 20 years he spent as the commissioner of the PGA Tour. Beman turned pro in 1965 at the age of 25. He qualified for 14 Masters and racked up 6 total professional wins. However, his stint in the pros was short due to injury, which forced him to retire. But he stayed close to the game, and by 1974, Beman was the commissioner of the PGA Tour. When he held that position, he helped launch the Senior PGA Tour, the Korn Ferry Tour, and helped develop golf to be an in-person spectator sport. This launched more TV coverage, which allowed for the tour's assets to go from around $500,000 when Beman began to around $5 million when he left. The Maryland grad is a member of the University of Maryland Athletics Hall of Fame, the World Golf Hall of Fame. And after his time as commissioner, he spent time playing some senior tournaments, 69 in total. Didn't have too much success, but was still able to play in his older years. And he is still alive at the age of 85. And he's this week's Terrific Terp.
We love some golf here at Under the Shell. Me and Brendan especially. I've never seen Mike on the course, but I don't think I really want to see that, to be honest. So
I would like to see it.
I hear Steve House can golf, though. Shout out, Steve.
He's a massive golfer. Does not run in the blood, though. I did not pick that up.
The apple apparently falls far from the tree.
Very far.
But that was a fun episode. Really, really, really probably the best time, I think, in sports is this transition period right here when you got everything going on. And we'll keep providing you coverage. We have some super, super exciting interviews coming up over the next couple of weeks. We got, someone who, like we said, can speak about Coach Dreisel's legacy next week. The week after, we have a Maryland basketball legend, and then more to come in the future. So be sure to stay on the lookout at Twitter, at Spotify, at Apple, at Instagram, wherever you get your any type of content. Under the Shell's got you covered. Follow us there at Under the Shell. Follow us on Apple and Spotify, Testudo Times. And for all of you guys, enjoy the rest of your Februarys.
Guess what? You've got Under the Shell podcast. Nobody does it better.